Happy Diwali!
Oh shit, oh shit. Ouch! Ouch! Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Oh shit,
कोई भी हिंदू भरा भैन कोई भी हिंदुओं का घर आतिशबाजी ना करे।
ट्रूडो साहब की जो पुलिस है वो खालिस्तानियों की पक्ष में खड़ी दिख रही है। उनके अंदर मंदिर में आके वहां पे अटैक किए जा रहे हैं और उनको कोई रोकने के लिए तैयार नहीं है।
I mean, after coming out on October 14th, anything's possible.
Astonishing scenes from Canada where pro-Khalistani groups targeted a temple in Brampton, staging protests that turned violent outside the gates. Inside was a consular camp being organized by Indian officials, and among those present were not just Hindu devotees, but also elderly Sikhs. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Today, we are looking at the nose-diving relations between India and Canada. There has been one development after the other with a very special guest. He has been the Premier of British Columbia, and he's also been an outspoken critic, one of the rare Canada politicians or public figures who has called a spade, who has called out Trudeau for his patronage of Khalistanis and Khalistani groups. I want to welcome to the program Ujjal Dosanjh. As I said, Mr. Dosanjh has been the Premier of British Columbia. He's been a former minister in the Canada government, and his recent column actually called out Justin Trudeau for being sociologically and politically an idiot. Mr. Dosanjh is one of the rare public figures in Canada today who is not mincing his words. Thank you very much for your time. We are talking on a day when pro-Khalistan groups have staged a violent protest outside a temple in Brampton. There has also been an incident in Surrey, which is in British Columbia. Before I come to the arguments made in your column, I want your take on what's happening. There have been condemnations at what happened outside Brampton from Justin Trudeau downwards, but I think I could count on the fingers of one hand how many politicians actually mentioned the K word, Khalistan. Let's talk about what happened in Brampton, and then we'll come to your column, Mr. Dosanjh.
Well, what happened in Brampton is the result of years of neglect and amnesia on the part of the Canadian politicians vis-a-vis the issue of Khalistani extremism, violence, and hate, which has been openly spread in the Sikh temples by the Khalistanis in the temples that they've taken over. Now, these two events didn't only happen in Surrey and in Brampton. There's also the Vancouver Sikh temple, where the same similar group of Khalistanis created a problem. So much so that the management had to go to the Supreme Court to get an injunction to keep them away from the temple. So, what's happened now, the qualitative change is that they have beaten up progressive secular Sikhs in many of the temples. They've taken them over by violence. Now, for the first time, that violence is now reached the Hindu temples, where there were Sikhs inside too, because Hindus and Sikhs worship together much of the time. And but the aim of these Khalistanis is to create a wedge between the two communities, and that's what the hate and violence is their stock in trade, and the politicians in this country have allowed them to continue to trade in insults and violence and hate. Like Nidja had openly argued with about how they killed Indira Gandhi, how they're going to kill other people that stand in their way in Khalistan. And nobody prosecuted him. Nobody investigated him. These people make hate speeches all the time in various temples. Do you think seriously, and I don't know the answer to this, but do you seriously think that if somebody a Canadian citizen, Pannu is a Canadian citizen, if somebody said that all of the Jews in Canada should be expelled from Canada, do you think seriously that he or she would not be prosecuted for hate crimes? He or she would be, and must be, should be. And why are these Khalistanis? Why is Pannu? Why are these other people who are making these calls? Why are they not being prosecuted? That is because there has been absolute failure of the political class and the law enforcement, I must say. You have to eventually come to that.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. I think you raise a very pertinent question when you say, what if Pannu, the same Gurpatwant Pannun who made a threat against specific Air India flights, whose latest threat spoke about Diwali not being celebrated, warning people not to celebrate Diwalis at temples, using what he called, quote unquote, the Khalistani way to ensure that this doesn't happen. Why is Trudeau? The question is this. Why does Trudeau feel invested in a Gurpatwant Pannun? Because if you look at, as you mentioned, the images of where the consular camp was today, and I want to play those pictures, among those were not just Hindu devotees, but many elderly Sikhs. And it's very important to not conflate Khalistani with Sikh. These are the images that the Indian High Commission posted to show what was actually happening at Brampton when the attacks were taking place outside. One has to assume that the majority of Sikhs in Canada, just like we know this to be a fact for the majority of Sikhs in India, are not interested in Khalistan. You yourself, I think, have argued that you think only 5% of Canada's Sikh diaspora probably backs the Khalistani ideology or extremism. In that case, why is Justin Trudeau so invested in protecting this man whom India designates as a terrorist?
Well, Justin Trudeau came to power with the support of the Khalistanis. In the 2006 leadership race, there was somebody else who ran, and Trudeau supported him. He lost eventually, but he was supported by the Khalistanis. Some of them were eventually ended up Khalistanis and Islamists. Some of them actually ended up in Trudeau's cabinet. The whole of that apparatus of that particular leadership campaign got folded into Trudeau's leadership campaign when he ran for leadership. And therefore, those two or three individuals who had organized, Islamists and the Khalistanis who were organized, ended up eventually in his cabinet. I mean, that's how deep Mr. Trudeau is. The two individuals that had been in his cabinet, I was trying to persuade them to not support someone that Trudeau supported in the 2000 leadership race. I was still an MP. And these two people, their only question to me was, would your leader agree to a sunset clause in the anti-terror legislation that Canada has? Sunset clause means that it would die. The anti-terror legislation would die unless the House passes it again or does something. Why would two people who are MPs, who want to be in cabinet, want to be elected, why would they want an end to anti-terror legislation in Canada? You tell me. And they were his cabinet members at some point.
Yeah. So you are making the argument that Trudeau needs these people politically. But if you look at the cancelled Diwali event, the Conservatives are today also accused of being in bed with Khalistanis. Many Indians who I know who live in Canada say that the entire political class is embedded with the Khalistanis, that you are quoted often as that rare example of somebody who stands apart and aside of them, who's called them out, who we should remind our audience has actually in the 1980s been attacked by an assailant with an iron rod for calling out Sikh extremism. The question is, would it be any different tomorrow if Trudeau were to lose and somebody else were to win, given the developments of the last year?
Well, one hopes that there might be difference, but from what Mr. Poilievre has done and what Mr. Jagmeet Singh is doing, we know that he's a Khalistani sympathizer, at least, if not a Khalistani himself. After what they did to Diwali, I attended Diwali events when I was an MP. After what they've done to Diwali, I don't have any confidence that the Conservatives might be better than Mr. Trudeau. I think the reason they do what they do or don't do what they don't do is because they don't want to lose any support whatsoever. But what the vast majority of the Sikhs and Hindus, what they have to say to the political class is, we will not support you if you don't act on these issues. They have not done that in the past. And it may be now beginning to happen, hopefully, which is a good sign. And
Yeah.
that needs to happen.
Today, for instance, there has been a statement from a number of the Hindu groups saying that no politician who doesn't condemn Khalistan will be welcome at their places of worship.
Good for them. Absolutely good for them. I think that, already, I mean, there are some temples that are controlled by non-Khalistanis. They don't welcome people who support Khalistanis usually in those temples, unless somebody just wants to come and pray, but not as guests.
Yeah. Now I want to come to your column that is really making global headlines. It's been widely quoted here in India. It's making created a stir in Canada.
It wasn't meant for India.
Well, but it's obviously, Indians are now very invested. You can imagine why in what's happening in Canada. And now the question is this: you have said Trudeau is sociologically and politically an idiot. These are strong words. You have also blamed him for this rise in extremism. Explain why you look at Trudeau and you say, hang on, you're to blame.
Well, as I said, he came to power with Khalistani paraphernalia around him. He put them in his cabinet. He doesn't want to make any enemies. He hopes that Hindus and vast majority of the Sikhs wouldn't punish him. So far, they haven't punished him. They should punish him. They should punish any politician that doesn't do anything about violence and hate in the temples or in the community. The reason I called him what I called him, perhaps unwise choice of words, but absolutely appropriate, because he and I differ on how you build a nation, particularly a young nation as young as Canada. He says you can come to Canada and be who you are. I say, if you want to come to Canada, if you want to be who you already are who you are. Why come to Canada?
Correct.
You come to Canada to make yourself better. The other thing, we have disagreements about social and cultural integration. I believe that the kind of policies that Mr. Trudeau has been promoting or not denouncing build ghettos and where there's no social, political, or cultural integration. And if that doesn't happen, then you see what's happening at the temples. Then you see these ghettoized Khalistanis or Islamists or others attacking different institutions, different people. And so my argument with him is whether he says Canada has no mainstream, which means like Canada really doesn't have a culture. So my argument with him, I've had it with him actually when we were MPs together, he and I differ, is that if we don't have a mainstream, then we're not a people. Then we're not really a country. A country needs a degree of social solidarity and social cohesion to survive as a nation, as a state. And he is not building that solidarity or that cohesion.
Yeah. So I want to come back to Gurpatwant Pannun. I come back to him because he was the lawyer for Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the killing of whom has been at the center of the showdown between India and Canada for more than a year now. He also has dual citizenship of both Canada and the United States of America. And in video after video, he makes brazen calls for the balkanization of India. I think you're on point when you say, imagine if this was somebody talking about Jews or literally any other community, but Indians. And yet he is protected under free speech. He is mainstreamed on the public broadcaster in Canada. And in the minds of many Canadian people who are not from the Indian diaspora, he's a Sikh activist, right? This horribly ignorant phrase activist for Pannu, who has actually released a list of Air India flights on which he has asked people not to travel, who has warned that there should be no Diwali celebrations. Who or what is protecting this particular man whom India has designated a terrorist?
Well, this is minimizing and understating the threat and the kind of damage that Mr. Pannu is doing to the fabric of society in Canada. I think it's lack of proper law enforcement. lack of political will. If you don't interfere in law enforcement, they're independent. But if you as politicians stand up and say, you know what, Mr. Pannu, that is absolutely unacceptable, or you say, we would not tolerate people organizing to dismember a friendly country. India was a friendly country until recently. If you had the courage and the foresight to say that, these kinds of organizations and groups wouldn't emerge in the first place in your country. And that's why my anger boils over when I think about what Mr. Trudeau has done to Canada. I love India, but I'm more concerned about Canada. I'm a Canadian now. This is where I am.
Yeah, but is Trudeau ill-advised, or is he, as you said, just an imbecile when it comes to building nations?
Oh, I just don't. I don't think he has any understanding of how you build a country, how you build progress, how do you build a progressive, a secular, a forward-looking nation where citizens feel fully socially, culturally, and politically integrated. What I see now are ghettos, ghettos of people from the Middle East, ghettos of people from India, like Sikhs, in around some of the Khalistani temples. That is not how you build a country.
Yeah. But the question is now what? If you see the condemnations that came after what happened in Brampton or other temples, nobody except two people and yourself used the Khalistan word. They just said temples were attacked as if it was disembodied aliens that had landed outside the Brampton temple. Right? What's going on? Are people intimidated? Are politicians scared of Khalistanis?
Absolutely. These people are threatening. They're intimidating. They beat you up. Sometimes they kill you. I mean, they killed a visiting Punjabi cabinet minister. They came to kill me. I survived. And so they kill. They harm you. I'm not speaking for the fun of it. I just feel so deeply about the country where I am in, and also about the country that I left behind. India is not without fault in this controversy between India and Canada. I think both sides are to blame. We can argue about that. But I think that my question is much larger, that I want to see this country develop in a particular fashion. Mr. Trudeau is destroying the fabric of this society. That's what makes me angry. I came from a family, my grandfather spent 8 years in British jails. My father was an activist, and I am a secular, progressive individual. If somebody wants to know, yes, I grew up in a Sikh family. I don't deny that. I don't disown that. But, religion is not everything. It shouldn't define a whole person. What these guys want to do, like if you have 500 people, let's say 5,000 or 10,000 Khalistanis in Canada, they are sitting here trying to build a religious theistic state 15,000 miles away. What are they and their children going to do here in the next 50 years? They might want to build a little theistic ghetto here. Why should you, as the leader of the country, not be worried?
Yeah. So you actually think that famous phrase that's, snakes will come and bite. If you keep snakes, they'll come and bite you in your backyard is what's playing out right now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've been warning Canada for a long time. Yeah. I mean, now, look, Khalistanis have been beating up Sikhs at the Sikh temples for a long time. And now they've gone to the Hindu temples. I'm glad that it's out, that they are now being exposed, and something might be done. Whereas Sikhs beating up other Sikhs, nothing was being done.
Yeah. And I don't think people know that. I think the problem is that there's so much ignorance in the West, even in Canada, about the fact that Khalistanis are doing that. The Khalistani and Sikh are used as interchangeable nomenclatures, which
absolutely.
is offensive.
I mean, they've made Mr. Nijjar my leader.
Shocking.
Oh, it is. It's absolutely shocking. It's absolutely shocking. Yeah.
Let me ask you though, towards the end, as you said, they came for you, right? In the 1980s, when you called them out for what they were, they came for you. An assailant came to you with a rod. You ended up in hospital. You could have been killed. You haven't stopped calling them out. Aren't you scared?
I feel so deeply about the kind of country that my grandfather wanted India to be.
Yeah.
And I don't want Canada to be the kind of country that my grandfather thought shouldn't be a country. Like, we thought there should be secular, progressive, core values of a society where people live with each other, worship the way they want to. Like, you can hang yourself upside down and worship in your space. I couldn't care less, as long as you don't interfere with my life, and you don't interfere with the life of the state per se.
Yeah.
And but that's not the kind of Canada we're building under Mr. Trudeau. And I'm afraid Mr. Poilievre, by canceling Diwali, has shown that he is somewhat bendable, flexible on these issues.
And before we let you go, the travesty of the fact that Liberal MPs, or at least some of the Liberal MPs, are now rallying supporters to talk about conspiracy theories when it comes to the Kanishka bombing of 1985, where not just was justice not served, the mastermind is even today celebrated in pockets of Khalistani ghettos, Parmar. And now you have pamphlets being distributed that are actually, blaming India for this bombing. I mean, it is just disgusting.
And Mr. Trudeau, one of the MP from Mr. Trudeau's party, is sponsoring that petition. I mean, Mr. Trudeau and his colleagues in the House, some of them, they need their heads examined. Mr. Justice Major held an inquiry. I testified there. Others testified there. And do we now say that he was somehow misled? That he was like a moron? He was a retired Supreme Court judge.
Yeah. So what happens next? What do you see happening between India and Canada?
You may not like this, but I think India needs to change its attitude towards Canada. Canada has given them some information which came from the US, which may have come from Canada as well. They've charged for people. Obviously, there is fire. That's why there is smoke. So India should address it seriously and not make this sort of thing a punching bag. Look, Canada is not an unserious country. If Canada has made the allegations, perhaps not made so properly.
I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt you, that the allegations were not made in a very serious way.
Well, that's what if the allegations were made, however they were made, let's disregard that. But Canada is a serious country. They've made the allegation. India is a serious country. They should work together to figure it out. There are over a million Indians here, people of Indian descent. We will be the meat in the sandwich. We won't get our visas to come back to India, and vice versa. And I think that's, other than trade and those things, that is also a tragedy, would be a tragedy if it happened.
Well, look, I know you have to go, so let me just ask you in the end, if you met Justin Trudeau, like walking down the street or somewhere else at a public event, what would you say to him?
He might not listen to me, but I would say to him exactly what I've said to you, that he should pay attention to what he's doing to the country. Winning elections isn't the only thing in life. You want to be remembered for something more than you were the prime minister of the country. You want to be remembered for what you did as the prime minister of the country.
Ujjal Dosanjh, always a pleasure. Thank you. And I have a feeling we'll have a lot of opportunity to talk to you, maybe for all the wrong reasons in the next few weeks and months, but it's still always a pleasure to talk to you. Take care and thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.